Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Analytics Enabling Resilience in Manufacturing, a series of virtual panel discussions unlocking the impact of digital transformation on key areas of the manufacturing domain. I am Roudra Bhattacharya, and in today's episode, we will be discussing optimizing manpower through analytics and digitization. Our discussion today will revolve around leveraging analytics and AI driven insights to optimally improve the productivity of human resources in this current post pandemic scenario. Joining me today are some esteemed thought leaders from the manufacturing industry, including Mr. Ajoy Lall, Vice President, Manufacturing and Commercial Vehicle Business Unit, Tata Motors, Mr. Amarnath, SKP, Group Head, Global R&D, Asia at Apollo Tyres Limited, Mr. R. Siddharthan, Executive Director, HR at Dalmia Cement Limited, and finally, Mr. Nabuath, Ulla, Practice Head, Manufacturing and IoT Analytics at SAS. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin our session with a keynote address by Mr. Khan on workforce analytics. This will be followed by a panel discussion where our experts will share their thoughts on today's topic. Without further ado, let's get started. But before that, I have a quick poll for our audience. The first poll is on workforce analytics. It'll be open for about 30 to 40 seconds. Our panelists can vote as well. It's on your screen. Request you all to vote. This is basically going to help us set up context for our webinar today. So about 50 people have voted till now, encouraging others to vote as well. So the question is, are you aware of the concept of workforce analytics? And I will just tell you what the results say. Closing the poll now. Right. So we asked, are you aware of the concept of workforce analytics? 66% of our audience said yes. 34% said no. So great. I think Mr. Khan's presentation right after this will give you a lot of details and on the same. Over to you, Mr. Khan.
Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Joining at this particular hour is of real good to have everyone out here, right? And again, we all know for a fact that we are in the unprecedented times, and the topic that I'll be touching upon today will definitely cover a couple of aspects on how do we optimize the overall workforce or our manpower, in addition to ensuring that we align it with the digital and the technological advancements that are happening in the world, and how can we leverage or make use of them to ensure that we help our employees, or in fact help ourselves as well, and stay away from burning out, right? Because everyone in India specifically is getting into this construct of working from home, and this is something which is relatively new for all of us, and the time between the personal and the professional is thinning, right? So how do we better manage that is something that is very evident, because if you're not able to better manage that, burnouts are bound to happen. That's one of the aspects, right? In addition to that, how can we as organization leaders help manage our workforce in a better way to ensure that we not only help our employees but also make good amount of benefit to the organization, right? So those are the key aspects that I'll be covering on today. And before I move any further, again, I'd like to thank everybody because of the fact that we started off this particular series a couple of months back, where the concept actually came out when we were interacting with a couple of leaders from the organization, where we were talking in general about how can we leverage IoT, how can we leverage AI, how can we leverage ML in the aspects of manufacturing organization. in helping our clients reap the benefits much faster. While we were deliberating a little more on this, we understood that IoT is a small term which is used in various aspects, right? So when I talk about various aspects, we went ahead with coining that, or in fact, dividing this particular IoT benefit area into five different segments for our manufacturing organizations. When I talk about that, the five M's are material, manpower, machinery, methods, and measurements. These are the five predominant pillars when we talk about organization specifically aligned towards manufacturing and specifically aligned towards how can we make use of the advanced technologies which are available right now to quickly benefit ourselves, right? Now that's the concept that got coined basis the discussions that we had, and we've already concluded that basic high level view in terms of what these 5 M's are. In addition to that, just a couple of weeks back, or in fact I believe it was last month, we went ahead with dedicatedly focusing on the materials management bit, which covered the entire spectrum of the overall supply chain view that we wrapped up. And now, today, we are going ahead and focusing on manpower as a section. Like we planned series of these webinars where we'll keep covering 1 M at a time, right? So that's the aspect now. And again, when I talk about manpower today, the key aspect, in fact, the key question that we need to ask ourselves is if either we as individuals or the organization that we are working in is currently dealing with this massive impact because of the COVID hit that has happened, right? If that's the key stuff, and if we are planning in for what should be our new normal way forward, say in 2021, or if we would be going ahead and continuing this journey of working completely virtually from homes, or are we going to have a mixed bag of combination of employees going on into the offices and a few of them working from home or from remote areas, or how do we better manage the actual blue collar workforce which is on the manufacturing line as well, right? So those are the aspects. If at all you're dealing with all of those aspects, I think you're at the right place, because today we are going to discuss three specific areas. One, and again, this is not going to be in a presentation form. These 3 points are going to be deliberated, dwelled about, or in fact factored in. We're going to go ahead and deliberate a lot more with the esteemed panel that we have today from various organizations as well, right? So we'll deliberate all of these in detail. And the key topics that we'll be speaking about is aligned towards how does a manufacturing organization scale up, or in fact better manage their overall resources. When I say resources, I'm purely specifying the overall workforce or the manpower. How do we better manage the overall manpower within the organization, while we also ensure that we maintain the social distancing norms that are there in place? And how do we better upskill and cross skill our employees to manage the overall workforce analytic, or in fact workforce structure, to ensure that we have the right balance of people who are on the shop floor, or who are in the virtual environment, or who are balancing a act between the virtual and the physical environment. And lastly, we'll touch upon the aspects of how does this entire AI based, or the machine learning and the AI based environment look like, and how can we better make use of the real time data that is coming in? How can we use that? How do we try and simplify everyone's life and ensure that we give the required time and the necessary uplift, or the overall employee satisfaction gets uplifted rather than we going ahead and burning them out, right? So those are the aspects that we'll dwell on. Now, quickly jumping on to couple of focus areas, right? So when we talk about the manpower analytics or the workforce analytics, the key aspects that everyone talks about today is we need to ensure that we have a right planning mechanism in place. Secondly, we also talk about how do we better manage our recruitment, how do we better manage our employees who are currently working or associated with us, how do we ensure that we have the right set of risk scorings available against each of those employees, how can we identify a couple of early warnings to ensure that the retention is done or maintained healthily rather than having an attrition which can rise up, and then mixing that up with the cost elements as well, in terms of what is the overall cost factor as far as this workforce is concerned. How can we better model the overall cost dynamics to ensure that we have a mixed balance in the new normal while not only taking good amount of benefit with respect to the overall infrastructure free up or the bandwidth free up, and aligning it back to uplifting or motivating our employees as well. And then we are talking about the cross skilling, upskilling, and the succession planning bits and so on and so forth, back to the training aspects. So these are the normal terms again that everyone, specifically in the HR environment, or be it the production environment, or be it the quality environment, or the R&D environment, and all of the vertical leads and the heads generally talk about this when everyone focuses on the workforce. So the important aspect again that I want to paint in front of everyone today is how do we better manage all of this, right? So these terms are very catchy. These terms are well known in the industry. There's nothing new about it. But when we talk about leveraging the right set of data that is available at this particular point in time, how do we better make use of it? How do we understand as to what is impacting my employees? How do I understand as to what can benefit my employees? How can I go ahead and better manage the overall cost? How can I mix balance, or in fact have a mixed balance of the skill sets that are needed for thriving in future? And also ensuring as to what type of training needs arise when we are talking about, first of all, moving virtually. Secondly, we are talking about advancements in the overall technology realm and the space. How do we better manage mixed balance of these to ensure that we're future ready, right? So those are the aspects. Now the critical pieces that I will touch upon, right, is about leveraging a ready solution which is spinning around all of these areas that we are talking about, right? So how do we better utilize that ready solution available rather than going ahead and investing to build everything right from scratch? Though there may be a couple of factors which can be worked out on a, say, spreadsheet or on any kind of a visualization tool, but the need of the hour is because of the fact that the data is increasing dramatically, and we are able to capture a lot of information, be it structured and unstructured data. Specifically, when you talk about managing the overall employee retention bit, or understanding as to what your employees are talking about. Are they happy? Are they satisfied? Are they skilled enough to go ahead and take up the larger roles? Are they skilled enough to own up the responsibility all by themselves? And so on and so forth. All of this data actually is in a very unstructured fashion today, right? So how do we manage all of that unstructured data, pull all of that, define it, and drive the entire aspect of what if analysis? That's the critical base. If we are able to go ahead and derive out the right set of questions asked on to that data environment that is available, then probably we, as organization leaders, get the right set of mindset and right set of themes to attack on. So those are the aspects that we generally want to shift the entire leadership structure or the thought process towards, right? Where we are talking about, let's go a little logical, let's go and take up that leap of faith, let's try and pivot out from the traditional way of doing things, right? How can I better manage all of this unstructured information coming in? How can I link up to even the social media accounts if need be, right? So there is a lot of social media uh, hype that goes on. If an employee is dissatisfied, he may just go ahead and dump in tons of information on Twitter, on Facebook, or on any medium that is available today, right? So how do we understand, or in fact, it's not about going ahead and policing on an employee, but it's just trying to ensure that we keep our workforce very happy while we manage our internal cost, our brand images, our brand value, and so on and so forth, right? So those are the aspects that we definitely want to focus on, where we are aligning our strategies and the key goals for meeting the business deliverables while keeping our workforce happy, while managing the better cost structures, by managing the overall skill set itself if needed. For instance, if I talk about going ahead and working in this new normal today, right, I may have certain skills and one of my colleague may have the other skills. How do I cross pollinate? How do I ensure that I marry these two skills together so that I complement the colleague of mine in case if at all he isn't available today? So how do I better manage that? And all of these skill sets are unique to an individual. It may be very, very evident that a few of the resources are really, really good, while the other resources are trying to learn about it. So how do we cross pollinate that? How do we understand as to what the employee is thriving for? And while keeping all of this, while we are working towards all of this, we need to ensure that we are aligning all of this to our organizational goals, right? So those are the aspects that we are generally talking about. And this is just a screenshot which gives us a view in terms of how easy is it to get all of this information into the system. How do we try and leverage all of that information to draw out correlation analysis, or be it understanding a deep dive on your decision tree, or getting a as basic as a pivot chart, which can give me a mixture of, or a matrix dashboard which can give me just the employee skills aligned towards the tenure, the requirements of the training, the employee's overall effectiveness in terms of the history, or what is exactly happening overall in the ecosystem, right? And then running extensive what if analysis to ensure that we meet the required stated goals of the organization is something that we are talking about. And now, quickly latching on to how do we support our customers in this journey. And again, this is not a new concept for us. In fact, given the fact that we are in this unprecedented time, this has become much more relevant for us. And there are a couple of key clients and key engagements that have deepened up because of this remote workforce structure. I have a couple of names that I'll talk about in a while. But in general, when we talk about this specific area, the overall arcing space that we play around with is starting off with the advisory services, right? Where we try and understand as to what exactly is the need of the organization and stitch a detailed blueprint along with the overall roadmaps that we need to overlay to ensure that the operating models are in place. Followed up with designing the overall IT and their infra architectures, and then going ahead and helping our clients and sharing a couple of best practices that probably we may have learned from various other clients or from the other cross country or the cross border organizations as well, right? So those are the aspects that we generally work with to begin our journey with our clients. And then we talk about going ahead and deploying the SaaS software, which is an out of box software which gives you all of these insights on a click of a button, right? So here you're able to go ahead and have a solution which is readily available for you, which not only gives you the insight on what's happening with your employees and how is it impacting the organization, how do you better optimize your resources to ensure that you don't take a hit on your production environment or onto any kind of a structure. While keeping all of that in mind, there is a solution which does all of that for you on the fly, right? Where we talk about doing all of that on the structured, mixing it up with the unstructured data, or in fact, if there's any social media feed that is coming in on real time, pull that up, combine it together, start looking at the savings bit, and so on and so forth. And lastly, we talk about going ahead and accelerating the overall implementation process by deploying our in-house consultants who are from the respective domains, from the respective industries, who understand the nuances of what's happening within the overall structure of employee engagement or the overall aspects of manforce or the manpower, right? So those are the aspects that we generally work with in our clients. And a few of the organizations that I want to quickly tag here today is, in fact, I've taken up a few of the examples from the United States, and I deliberately did not want to add up anything related to India because of the fact that most of the organizations are doing something or the other in a traditional way form. And everyone is talking about moving into digital realm. And a few of the conversations that we are having as of today are in the most matured state. And I don't really want to dwell the names out here as a matter of fact because of the agreements that we have with our clients, right? So the references that you're going to see on the screen are predominantly open and widely accepted. So one of the examples is about the Ohio Healthcare, which is based out of Cary, right? So this is where we are working with them very closely in understanding, or in fact going ahead and optimizing the overall workforce that is needed to manage this pandemic situation. That's one of the key and the larger aspects where we're working together to ensure that the right set of resources are available at the right time to ensure that the patients are not getting impacted. So this has become the need of the hour today, right? So when we talk about the healthcare systems today, everyone is overstretched. All the doctors are overstretched because either a few of them aren't working completely or a few of them are overclocking. So how do we better manage that? How do we better manage the overall optimization of these doctors and their rosters and so on and so forth, which is getting a big headwind at this particular point in time, followed with a couple of other pieces with respect to the natural resources conservation services. This is again a deep engagement where, given the scenario that we are in, we are helping our client in managing, in fact, deploying the right set of resources at the right time for the projects which are either starting or which are in the midway or which had taken a halt because of this pandemic and now they are kickstarting again. Likewise, a couple of aspects in terms of the SOCOM, which is a special force command in the US. Now, this is an interesting aspect where it is not really aligned towards the right set of resources at the right place and the right time. But in fact, if you take a deeper look at this, here is an investment call that needs to happen, right? Where we try and understand as to which is the right set of candidate that you need to invest your money on, which you need to bet on, because that's the future now, right? So how do you better manage all of that, given that everyone in the globe is grappling about, or in fact struggling with the crunch in the budget? So do you need to optimally go ahead and ensure that you still continue your funding? If yes, what is that you need to do, right? So those are the aspects that we are currently focusing on again. And a quick insight on the Air Force as well. So again, the Air Force bit for US again, where we are talking about ensuring that we get all of the information up and running on a single platform or a single source of truth, which can be queried upon, and a quick what if analysis can be run to determine as to what questions you have an answer for, right? So those are the critical aspects. I did not want to dwell much more into this because I want to have a good panel discussion today, because we've got industry leaders today, right? So thank you once again for hearing me out. Let's get back to the panel discussion, and we'll see you again in the next webinar when we talk about the connected machines as a theme. Over to you, Roudra. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. I think that was really interesting, especially the use cases towards the end, defense, and definitely a very critical sector and a significant amount of investment. Of course, special forces, the training required is a significant investment. So if you can have better decision making there and thereby guarantee better output, why not? So I think very. I found that presentation quite interesting, and definitely in our current situation, we are dealing with a extraordinary sort of industrial and an economic sort of crisis. Most of our companies have figured out very innovative ways to deal with it. Inviting all our panelists on screen, please do join us, Mr. Amarnath, Mr. Siddharthan, Mr. Khan, and Mr. Lall. We will just begin with the panel discussion. Also, for our attendees, we will so please do ask questions. We have the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I will be making a note of the questions, and towards the end of our panel discussion, we will take a few of these up with our panelists. Right. So moving forward, I think we have Mr. Lall. Just waiting for Mr. Lall to join. Hi, sir. Yes. And the reason I've been waiting for you is because my first question is for you.
Oh, hi. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Go ahead. Shoot.
Okay. So, the shortage of workers is of course one of the most important inefficiencies that organizations are facing this time, right? Especially for the manufacturing sector, we have seen a huge amount of workers during the early few months go back to their native villages. Also, I mean, production shop floors have had to be redesigned in terms of the process, etc. Now, and most factories, of course, are not obviously designed to function remotely. So, how can technology be utilized for better management of human resources at this time, and especially now when when we understand is that the demand is really going is bursting and production is catching up to demand, really, at least in some sectors. Sorry, yeah.
That's right. So it's a very good issue that you raise, Rodro, and I think it's a very genuine point. So when we started, I think the first task that we had was how to get the right people, right? People who have no infection, who have no background of having infection themselves or in their family, how to fetch them in the right manner, in the way the government of India and also CDS and everybody else actually announced the policies. So what we did was we actually looked at all these policy guidelines that came from government of India. We also looked at what happened in China, for example, what some of the other companies like Jaguar Land Rover, which is a kind of a group company, on what they did in China. So we picked up from these best practices. So first thing we did was kind of started a health app, and which kind of essentially requested all the employees to state their health conditions, in which area they belong, they stay in, because there are some containment zones which were highly infected, and therefore we avoided getting people from there. So we had actually a database of which people are actually eligible to come. We also had, in fact, our safety and health department, we also made out some norms, in the interest of health of people. So all the elderly in the sense people who were above 55 years of age, we asked them to work from home and not come in, because immunity is also a function of age. So we requested those people to work at home, and therefore we actually came to which people could be called, and how they could be called, and what are the norms, as you rightly mentioned, to be followed in the shop floor. As you know, in the assembly line, people work very close to each other. So how do we rebalance the line to make sure that those social distancing norm of 2 meters is still maintained? And if you have to come close, what are the kind of shields that happen, the SOPs that needed to come in place? So all that actually happened, and we started slow, in place of 3 shift or 2 shift operations. We started the single shift, and then we also started, as you know, in typically in an automobile industry, 60-70% people are permanent and rest are flexible. So then we also started hunting people who could come in and join us temporarily. In some cases, we had their tests done, pre-test, and when we found them okay, we brought them in, we trained them. And there are a whole lot of things. For example, one simple thing, Rodra, which I'll tell before I stop talking on this subject, is it's very important to be able to understand, that if something happens to this person, you discover it later, then what are the things that you have to do? For example, if this person has come in contact with 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 his colleagues, then how do you keep track of them? So we did something called a zoning. So people were kept track of each person works in which zone, and he is actually, everybody was identified with respect to a zone. And God forbid, if a COVID case was detected, then we went back to these people who were in this zone, get them proactively tested, ask them to rest, and all that. So all these things were done, to get back people and revive the operations. Does that answer your question, Rodra?
Yes, yes. I mean, actually, a lot of interesting points. I was listening intently, found quite a few things interesting. One is, of course, so you spoke about a mini Arogya Setu app for Tata Motors. Is that correct? Is that
That's right. That's
okay?
right.
Okay, and the other interesting part, and it helps being part of a group with global operations, that you can always. I mean, you mentioned you looked at the Chinese operation of JLR, and of course the bounce back of the economy for China, for Korea, were much faster. I mean, there were some great examples of how they were able to manage it. I'm sure the way technology was leveraged in order to do that must have been immense, but it's a question of people at the end of the day, right?
Quite right.
As well. Zoning is something Mr. Amarnath also mentioned. We were chatting right before we started off. So it seems to be a sort of a thing that most of the industry is practicing at this point. Mr. Siddharthan, I would like to sort of bring you in here. From an HR perspective, for Siemens, for the industry, how have you dealt with in terms of manpower shortage of the past few months? What are these innovative things that
Roudra, thank you for inviting me. The first thing we took charge is about protecting and supporting the talents. That is what the first challenge we took upon. So for that purpose, naturally, we created a knock, and then we started disseminating what are the protective measures somebody has to take care, all those things were done by that. But at the same time, since your earlier question was relating to the migrant workmen, because we have got a sizable number of migrant workmen working with us. If I have to give one example, that the migrant workers for our Tamil Nadu plant, you can see the distance from there, they were coming from Assam, interiors of Assam. So once the first lockdown was lifted, so we brought all of them by a coach from Assam to Tamil Nadu, like that. That's a distance. So we have to ensure everything on the way, all those measures we have taken care. This is one example I can.
These are buses or trains, coaches?
But that time the trains were also not introduced, buses. So you can understand that what are the measures, the safety measures we have to undertake, and crossing so many state borders, all the rules and regulations taken care, and the distance was massive. So they reached here like that. That is one example I can quote. And once they reached, let us say that, then though we are maintaining the social distancing and all factors, but from the engineering side or from the technology side, in the plants we have installed the high efficiency air filters, because this is the one which spreads more through the air. So we have taken care of that. High efficiency air filters were installed to the extent possible. Then we increase the ventilation in the plant, in the office, everywhere. How can we further increase it, though it was there available? And then, as usual, we instituted the physical barriers, such as plastic sneezing guards, all those things were given to them. But I would like to extend it to managing the supply chains. So I hope from HR we can get into that also.
Yes,
because continuity of the business, that is more critical. Because even for cement, if I don't have the cement bag, whatever we have manufactured is gone for it. And sometimes the bags were even imported from Sri Lanka, you can say. So in these conditions, naturally, we have to find out a resilient supply chain locally with low risk vendors. So we have done that for the one example of the supply chain you can take it. For example, for engaging with the customers, because of this COVID norms, now when you are using cement for construction of your house, you would like to have minimum workmen in your area, let us say that. Right. So how can we, at the same time, you need the cement or concrete to utilize, so we have slightly shifted towards ready-mix concrete. So which will give you the faster output. At the same time, you don't require scores of workmen on the site. So that is from the customer perspective we have taken care. And then the fourth one we took care is about informing the strategic steps and the financial decisions, that whatever we take, every decision was immediately rallied to everybody, you can say. Earlier, it may not be reaching directly, it may be reaching through certain channels, but this time we ensured that the decisions taken have to reach to the lowest denominator, so that we ensure. This is what I would say the four-pronged steps we have taken care.
Interesting. So product innovation, process innovation as well, and across, the mammoth task of getting workers across the country. I'm surprised you had the entire sort of contacts and list, and they were all reachable, because once they really go back to their villages, how do you really keep in contact?
Yeah.
So it seems to be a major logistic sort of exercise. I can really imagine. Mr. Amarnath, would you like to add to this? We were speaking about it right before.
Definitely. First of all, thank you, Mr. Roudra, for having me in this panel discussion.
Yes, sir.
So, in fact, I can only confirm what Mr. Ajoy Lall said and Mr. Siddharthan has said. Basically, we have roots and plants in Europe. I mean, where it's next to China, we got affected, and because our Chinese dependency is quite a lot on the materials, also, we started learning very quickly what is happening around. And then we started building little bit stocks, but suddenly India, caught up. This infection rate was going up. So what was happening is primarily, like Mr. Siddharthan said, our people are not very far away from our plants, but pretty much 400, 500 kilometers. And our plants are exactly located in the zones where the high infection rate was there, whether it is Gujarat, whether it is Tamil Nadu, or whether it is Delhi regions, where our presence is quite high. So what we as a company we did is, I think our vice chairman and managing director had a vision of two strong pillars. One is on the health and fitness was one of the key pillar. He has been, maybe I don't know, he predicted about since 2 years back, he has been pushing us to shed weight and even to become more healthy. There are a lot of initiatives has been taken on one front, and the other one is digitalization was one of the thing what has been done. For example, our factories has been converted into more into I 3.0, where one of our Hungarian plant in the year 2017 was commissioned, and where we had a lot of analytics based manufacturings. Already we learned quite a bit, but what was really challenging us is in this moment, being a new this kind of COVID situation, where we could not really instill confidence into the manpower. They were not really ready to come. Exactly, we sent even the coaches what Mr. Siddharthan said, but we were waiting and people are refused to come. So that is the main key challenge what we had, and we as a company supported them to bring them in a safe way, and we focused mainly reducing the contact density. That was one of the key priority for us, and this way we even started looking at all these kinds of contacts like apps like Arogya Setu we started with, where we matured quite a bit, and even we started buying acrylic seats in where the dining happens during the lunch. That is the place where people are not able to control themselves, not talking to the people. After 1 or 2 months, they meet the colleagues. That was really a challenging time for us. So, but the main thing is the farm sector has really boomed up suddenly, which we never thought of. We were unable to supply the tires, and because the supply chain has become a big bottleneck for us, and because of our digitalization journey, even in the commercial segment, where we could even the cash collection was quite rapidly, we got benefited. Yeah. So this way we got a quite a lot of even though a lot of hiccups, but we got benefited because of the digitalization per se, I would say.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So I think that really, so my next question is for Mr. Khan, and that's a great segue into it, right? So organizations are definitely currently battling with the question of are we sort of ready for remote work? Doesn't apply to manufacturing in a very large way, but some roles can definitely be done remotely, maybe in the R&D space to an extent, right? In your opinion, Mr. Khan, what are the fundamental things to keep in mind to build a sustainable and a flexible remote workforce? Also want you to answer this point on skilling, right? On people being ready to accept digital technologies, because there's always this fear. Right? It's a need of the hour, but there's always this fear. Please. 2 questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Roudra. In fact, even before I get to your 2 questions, I think I'd like to thank everyone, because we heard a lot, right? When we talk about hearing a lot, we heard how the entire story of getting people onto a coach and getting them into our facility, marking them into a zonal structure, ensuring that we keep them motivated, ensuring that we still maintain that social distancing. And in addition to that, we are also talking about using the digitized way of moving ahead. Now, if I try and look at this entire spectrum of the conversation that I've heard, we've generated tons of data, tons and tons of data today, right? And now the best possible way forward is how do we better make use of that data to ensure we are ready ourselves and be prepared for new normal tomorrow. You never know as to how long this pandemic is going to stay, right? Do you want to go ahead and do the entire activity right from collecting the information to trying to break our heads and building up something and then trying to do it again? The answer is, I think we shouldn't go that route at all, because of the fact that the hard work has already happened. Organizations and the leaders have already spent so much of effort, time, money, and everything. And a lot of data is already sitting. For example, I heard Mr. Lall saying about mini Arogya Setu app. I'm sure there's tons of data there as well, right? And even if you look at the paradigm of what exactly is government doing today, there's a lot of data that is getting generated on Arogya Setu. Government is making use of that data as well, right? Because that data is becoming much more critical to ensure that you tag a right set of guy in the right set of address and mark it out as a zone which is pretty dangerous to step into, right? So all of those aspects. And in fact, there were conversations where we were hearing about people talking of Arogya Setu app communicating directly with the other device as well and alarming out, or in fact beeping on the device if at all you come in contact with one of the resource. That's the kind of technology that we are headed towards, right? So a lot of data is there. Making use of that data in the right set of fashion will what help us in speeding up the entire process. That's how I'll answer the first question of yours, Roudra, in terms of how do we try and latch on to the data which is already sitting. How should we better make use of that data? How do we try and define out the automated machine learning based algorithms to drive out the meaningful insights and try and deploy that, right? That's one. The second aspect is, now this has become really, really critical as of today. I'd like to hear from everyone here again, right? Because very interesting thoughts flowing around, and I definitely want to encash on those points which are coming in and try to build up something which can help all of us together, right? So those are the aspects when we talk about the entire spectrum of digitization today. While, see, the focus here is to keep our facilities running. When we talk about our facilities running, we have a mixed balance of workforce there. A few of them are blue collared workers who are really, really critical and they have to be on the floor. And the second set of employees are the white collared employees, right? Who can stay away from being physically available in the facility, but they can still operate from the virtual location. Now, the important aspect, in fact, there are a lot of R&D related conversations that we are having. In fact, we are investing heavily in those type of solutions as well, where we are figuring out, or in fact coming out with solutions which can help our blue collar workers as well, right? So do you really need to have all the blue collar workers on the floor at this particular point in time? The answer is no. There are machines which are already digitized. There are technologies which are readily available. There are analytical solutions which are readily available to monitor the health of the equipments. We can do all of that. Do we really need the maintenance team out there on the floor? I don't really think so. You have your analytical algorithms which can predict and tell you as to when is your equipment going to go down. Why don't we make use of that? While we also try, and in fact, we are investing heavily, as I said, on the aspects of how do we virtually have, or in fact, the digital twin concept is not new. I don't want to dwell much on that because digital twin is something where everything is available digitally, right? But the aspects that I'm talking about, which is more futuristic, is how do we help our employees using the Google glasses, right? Can an employee who is not actually hands-on with the specific skill that is needed to fix say a component or a machine on the shop floor, can I just give him a Google Glass, enable him on the fly, where he can just start getting the steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5 of the kind of things that he needs to do, though he is not skilled, but he can still go ahead and perform it. Those are the ways of leveraging AI as well, right? So those are the headwinds that everyone is talking about, and that's probably the new normal as well. So there are multiple pieces that I've actually tried fragmenting into and throwing a couple of points here and there, Roudra. But I'll let you streamline this entire thought and control me as much as you can.
I think Mr. Roudra, you're on mute.
Yes.
Roudra, I would like to support Mr. Khan, what he said. Actually, we are practicing we have put a huge investment in our AP plant, which is being commissioned at this moment. And the machinery is what we imported is mainly all state-of-the-art equipments from various countries where specialization is there. And we could not wait, sweating our assets, so lying, and already the interest meter has started. So that's where, we did a lot of virtual commissioning, what Mr. Khan said. Some of the, this is a very, really challenging time. We used all kinds of people, I should say, where step-by-step instructions, which is given so that, these machines are commissioned, maybe not the way physically commissioned, but definitely we saved a lot of many months, I should say. So that is one area where I see really a digitization technology really helps. The second thing is, as a company, we have gone, even we did not keep reduce the motivation levels low at this moment. We virtually inaugurated the plant, calling all our customers, our suppliers, I think, including Tata Motors. Many of the people were there in the virtual inauguration, virtual conferences with our dealers. In fact, the response was even quite higher at a very, very nominal cost. I think we did a lot of digital technology use in our favor. I think we got, as a company, we got benefited a lot, I should say.
I think the amount of value we are able to unearth and really prove that virtually a lot of things are possible is immense. I mean, the fact that we are doing this virtually right now, and this is a great discussion, great content. I mean, this is just proof, a case in point, right? I mean, normally in the normal real world, we would have been meeting somewhere and having a panel discussion. And you mentioned automation, you mentioned mechanization. I mean, we're heading. I mean, Industry 4.0 is supposed to be sort of right there for us. Mr. Lall, Tata Motors, automotive industry is already very high up on automation, is it not? Just to add to what Mr. Khan has said, how have you sort of dealt with enabling the workforce to accept these new digital processes, to be able to commission things remotely? What are these innovative things you have done? Because this is really an entry to my next question, which is talks about actually creative part of leadership, right? But please, just wanted to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Roudra. But first of all, let me disagree with you on your previous comment, Roudra, when you said that only R&D can work from remote and manufacturing in the list can't. So, in fact, that's what all of us thought, Roudra, before this pandemic. But then we realized, in fact, I have been working from home, since the pandemic, because I've gone once or twice in a week. But, one used to be there in the plant for almost 10, 12 hours every day. But I'm telling you, it is possible to manage even in manufacturing working from home. Like, our colleague Mr. Khan was talking about that yes, some blue collars who are actually engaged in production jobs, they have to be there. But we did devise a kind of a rotation, so everybody need not come every day. So we had some kind of a rotation. For example, people come for 3 days, then they rest for 6 days. And therefore, when they're away, the infection will show up and all the precautions can be taken. But for maintenance, for example, just to give you an example, Roudra, when you shut down a plant, for example, when you shut down a paint shop, when this lockdown was announced suddenly, then you have to shut down the plant, and you have to do it in a way that it is safe, and it also doesn't result into huge losses. For example, in paint shop, as you know, there are kiloliters of chemicals across, for different processes of CD and final painting and all that. And therefore, these chemicals actually, if you're not operating, they have to be at standard temperature, and there also has to be a kind of a stirring. Otherwise, the chemicals would coagulate, and crores of rupees will go waste. Now, we could not afford to have a person there, and therefore, through through remote, by placing a camera there, by understanding the functioning of the motor for stirring and all that, we are actually able to monitor all this through our mobiles from remote distance. So many of these things actually got done, and therefore, Roudra, working in manufacturing from remote is possible. Not 100%, but to quite some extent. Right?
Wonderful, sir. And I think a lot of these learnings are not only limited to this situation, right? I mean, they are sort of setting the new standards going forward. Many of them might actually be great practices for cost and other factors, productivity, cost.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So, Radha, just to answer you the question that you asked me about, automation and all that. So I have a personal view here. Automation is very critical, but in our country, even employment is quite critical, and therefore you have to really choose the areas where you want to automate. Right? Automation is important for consistency in quality. Automation is important to, reduce the fatigue of your people. Automation is very critical where you have to handle dangerous, elements, heat or chemicals. You don't want to expose your people there.
Yeah.
You know, there are some areas where, quality food proofing is required, consistency is required, automation is important. So I think in Tata Motors, we have really chosen the areas that we want to automate for these reasons. Dirty, dangerous, fatigue oriented, and that's where we have applied automation. And we have also worked very closely with the automation service providers or automation providers, so that we actually have designed these systems which is customized for us, and therefore it is really at a very effective cost, and therefore we are still able to be do that automation at a relatively competitive cost.
Wonderful, and this is true to the Tata ethos, right? I mean, people first. Wonderful. This is great to hear that a company, I mean, so many years down the line, is sticking to its core that it's famous for. Mr. Siddharthan, before I move to the next poll question, actually, wanted to touch upon the importance of creative leadership, right? I mean, so this creative leadership, and this is something that Mr. Amarnath also just mentioned about physical fitness and the focus on that from the leadership at Apollo. This prioritizes physical and mental health of employees, which cannot be ignored, right? And which is sort of now come to the fore given the situation we are all living in, much more than before. So what are the key initiatives to undertake for protecting the workforce? What is your experience in your company, what you're seeing across the industry? Leadership is very, very critical in driving, inspiring.
Yeah. See, the one thing that we have taken an approach is a non-binary approach. That is what first we insisted that we should adopt it, because we are always used to that either of it kind of a situation, whereas the current pandemic is unpredictable. So that is the reason that we stressed on the non-binary approach. Then we were very clear and simple in communicating to the workers what are the things to be done. All those things in the local vernacular language, we have taken care, because our stress was more towards the talents as well as the customers. Because though we were shut down for totally about 1 month, you can say that is only in April. From May onwards, with the due permissions, we were allowed to carry on with our production. So that means we have to take care of the interest of the customers. So that is how we proceeded with that. But we have reduced the manpower by maintaining the social distancing and all. Naturally, we have to give them a half, paid off, all those things were taken care. That is how we progressed.
Interesting. Mr. Lall, requesting a comment or maybe something from your end to add this on the creative leadership aspect. Mr. Lall's video is... Okay, we will get back to this at the other side of the poll.
Maybe, Mr. Roudra, I would like
yes,
to
sir, please.
I have some points connecting to Mr. Siddharthan. See, actually, the three kinds of health. One is what you said exactly: the physical fitness, mental fitness, even the emotional side, well-being of the things. See, what is happening is we need to take care of our employees, especially on these three items, where the motivation levels, we need to keep it high. There are a lot of fear, psychosis gets into the minds of the people, because sometimes if I come to the office, then I carry some infection to my elder, family members in my home. These kind of things which is creating a lot of stress in the people. So we had at least some people had really turning a little bit showing the symptoms. So what we installed is virtual clinic. Virtual doctor is available 24/7, and there were the psychology doctors, which is to advise and counsel them, because even the especially the R&D side, work from home is really brings a lot of troubles, because they don't have sometimes the right tools available at home, and they live in small house sometimes, a lot of sounds. It creates a lot of anxiety to the people who are really attending Zoom meetings or something like that. So those kind of things which turn into a lot of issues. So the mental, emotional well-being was one of the key things where the white collar people had experienced a lot. I think I would say that is where our vice chairman himself was available on a routine basis. Every 15 days, he was engaging the people, through Zoom, what's happening around the world, how does he see it, what is that he gives importance. So those are the things which was, as a company, we started all the heads, senior people having connect, emotional connect with the people. That is really helps the organization. This, especially the uncertain situations, we don't know what will happen.
Right.
So that was really helped, I would say. Uh, that's what I would like to bring on the table.
So this is like the feeling of oneness, the fact that we are all in it together, and thereby sort of build confidence internally. Mr. Lall, Tata Group has a long sort of history with, as we just mentioned, of empathy, of this family culture, right? I mean, and this is a very difficult period for most employees, for the entire economy. A bit about creative leadership here. How has the leadership handle this situation? Creatively, leadership focuses on the physical and the mental health of employees, not the hard aspects, the soft aspects. What are the key initiatives, maybe at Tata Motors, maybe as a group, Tata Group, that you have seen?
So I'll talk about few simple things that we did. For example, all our plant leaders used, Facebook medium to communicate to all the families of the workmen. Telling them what are the new SOPs, how will you be, how will you be working in this change situation, and what does it mean for the family. What are the precautions that the person should take when he goes out of his house. How will the bus carry him, what will happen at the gate, what kind of thermal scanning, or what kind of zoning will take place, how will he maintain social distancing. And when we talked about all this, the family also felt kind of confident that their person will be taken care of. And also we talked about, in case there is an infection detected in any of your family members or you, how would the company help out. So therefore we had actually helplines, so anybody needed help, our doctors in our plant is to help them out in reaching out to the right place, to the right doctors, the right advice. Also, like you said, emotional well-being. So we had a one-on-one help. There was a consultant set up who actually who any employee could get across to them on a telephone, and there could be a 1:1 conversation. If the person is feeling low, or if any discomfort, so he could talk. So all these things were put in place. Of course, there are medical support and all that, which anyway goes, and it's there in most other companies. I think these are some of the things that we did do. And as I told you, anybody who had comorbidity, we did not allow. We requested them to work from home. 55 and above, we asked them to work from home. So employees could actually see. In fact, most of our union guys were very, very appreciative of whatever we are doing and how we are trying to take care of our people. And therefore, in fact, union also participated in this, in communication, in seeing that whatever is happening and how it is happening. And many times they had lots of suggestion. And in fact, one interesting thing, Roudra, is then we had some kind of a health steward on the shop. Now, health towards job, he's like a conscious keeper that all the SOPs and all the health measures that we have put, they are being followed. In case they are not, they are authorized to stop the line, call for their supervisors so that the right measure is actually put in place. So all these things we did together, and that's how we continue to manage.
Wonderful, really interesting. So instead of the person, you've decided that let's reach out to the family and build confidence, and that's a great idea. I mean, I mean people at home are more worried if the one person goes out, because you're really bringing that back in. Going to our second poll. Sorry.
I mean, for 1 minute, we have extended it to in the plant location to the superannuated employees and their families also.
Okay.
Because normally the people in the plant areas, they superannuate and reside somewhere nearby. To them, we extended all these facilities.
Excellent.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the confidence of being together as one family, and I think that's been critical in this very difficult period. Going to the poll now, and I'm just launching it about 30-40 seconds again. The second poll. I am sharing it right now, and all our panelists can vote as well, and our attendees. So the question is, in understanding employee behavior, which of the following methods can have maximum impact? And there are three choices. About 35 of our attendees have voted, requesting others to vote as well. Just keeping it open for a few more seconds. Okay. So we asked, in understanding employee behavior, which of the following methods can have maximum impact? And the results are out in front of you. 48% said predicting employee behavior. Okay. So predicting, I mean, so analytics is great, right? I mean, given the treasure trove of information that you have across several sources, you'll be able to figure out what is going to really happen, what is expected to happen, and the probability of that going ahead. 43% said defining key leading indicators as well. Great. So this really helps know which direction we are sort of going towards. Okay. My next question is for Mr. Lall. Maintaining business resilience is intrinsically related to managing costs, and at a difficult time like this, what inputs would you like to give to key stakeholders for staying competitive and generating value at the same time?
Absolutely right. I think cost is key critical. In fact, first 2.5 months of this financial year, there are almost no revenues because there are no customers who are going to come out to your showrooms or buy things, right? So it was almost no revenue. So first thing that we took upon ourselves is that if there is no revenue, how can you afford any cost? So that's where we started from: no revenue, no cost. And therefore we looked at each cost. In fact, what we did and this was an organization-wide movement. So we formed something called a cross-locational teams in our plants. And each of these team was led by a senior person, maybe a plant head. And all the cost items were bucketed. So we actually could bucket all the plant expenses. For example, the fixed conversion cost, the variable conversion cost, and the other fixed expenses into 9 different buckets. And we really took very stretch targets around that on how do we really cut it down. What is it that we can postpone for now, for example, and given the situation that we are in, and what is it that we can do much better or in a much improved way than what we're doing before. And therefore we looked at most of these at a de novo level, and lots of workshop took place where ideas were generated, and then ideas were taken through. We had a structured process called GEAR, where the ideas were generated. They went through a process of evaluation so that the idea is syndicated, and then idea was approved through a proper governance mechanism, and those ideas were implemented. And since these were cross-locational teams, one idea moved from one location to another location, the idea became really powerful, right? A 5 rupee idea going to 5 plants becomes a 25 rupee idea. So, that's the way we went about it. But you're absolutely right. Cost was extremely critical, and we looked at every cost, and we really worked on the principle of, kind of no revenue, no cost.
I mean, yeah, it's completely clear, and I think the way you mentioned was it was done very democratically across different groups, right? I mean, everybody brought in their perspective, and on this subject, Mr. Siddharthan. I mean, my next question. This is also the most opportune moment for deploying automation technologies, since worker density needs to be decreased on the factory floors, right? For organizations that are wary of taking the plunge, what advice do you have for this virtual shift? I mean, we spoke about automation. Many companies have, but some are still figuring out how to do it. What advice do you have for them?
In the current scenario, we have got no choice, I would say. For that, in one of our divisions, what we have deployed is the scenario planning, is the concept we deployed it. Yes, normally we know that how to plan for the future, how to take stock of the future, but we take time as a constant in all those things. For us, time was yesterday, today, and tomorrow, like that, we bucket it. In the scenario planning, it is not like that. It doesn't go in the sequential order. It goes crisscross anywhere you can take it. So we have deployed that scenario planning we have brought into in one of our new ventures which we are trying it out. So I would say that this pandemic has given us an opportunity to test it out like that.
So what is the scenario planning? Essentially, you're looking at different cases with automation, without automation, etc.
Yeah. See, let us say that today we are there. So let us look forward to, let us say that what will be that in future 5 years later. So then you roll it back immediately. And then for that, how do you meet out? This is the normal things. But here, the time doesn't go backward and forward like that. You can go in any direction.
Right. Mr. Khan, I mean, as we still battle to come to terms with the challenges of this pandemic, is there any way we can build a contingency plan for the future? How do you think analytics and digitalization can help us get there?
Right, very interesting question again there, Roudra. So I guess, see, all of this revolves around the kind of data that we have today, right? Now, data becomes the critical mass or the basic limitation, or in fact, I can say the basic entrant to derive out the future strategies. Like if I just pick up the last statement that I heard from Sridharan, so the important aspect that he spoke about was they are already doing scenario planning. Right now, the scenario planning concept that we heard a couple of minutes back is with no constraint of time. Now, if you translate that into, or in fact, if I try to bridge that particular piece along with the statements that I made a couple of minutes back in terms of what if analysis, that's what is the overall ball game that we'll have to try and tack on to. In fact, that's where we'll have to devise out various strategies using the current data that is available or any data that probably is needed that we may have to collect. Using all of that information, plan, in fact, do a bisection and dissection of your current scenario while you look at the horizon future. That's where the entire aspect of the moving components like your employee retention, or be it your employee health, or be it your employee motivation, or be it anything related to the organizational goals, right? All of those aspects come together and they work in tandem, right? So when we try and put all of this together, then plan out various scenarios to test out in a virtual environment without even putting them into production, right? Because if you're going ahead and doing this live, then you are standing a huge amount of risk where you're talking about going ahead and deploying something which you have not tested. That's where the virtual bit comes into play. That's where analytics comes into play, which will give you a hardcore reality right in front of your eyes while you're playing around with these data variables, so that you better manage that equipment, or in fact, show it to the overall management team, get their buy-in, roll it out into production. That's how you'll start reaping, or in fact, take a leap and then start saving your money and plan out for future, right? So that's how I'll try and summarize this, Roudra. So it is all about leveraging the existing data. If that data is missing, try and capture additional information, put it into a tool which can give you those scenarios or make use of the best available AI algorithms which are readily packed into it. Play around with the data. Ask the right set of questions. You will have the right set of answers coming in, using which plan your future. That's how I'll sum that up.
Interesting. Mr. Amarnath, I mean, the post-pandemic operating model will undoubtedly put a lot of emphasis on the upskilling and reskilling of employees, and we touched upon this. What role do you think analytics can play in this regard? You're already working in the engineering space with several employees you're looking to sort of upskill and also to deal with this current situation.
Oh, I think it's really a good question. How we as a company see is this upskilling of the employees is one of the, the multi-skilling is become a very need of the hour because someone, we have a limited people, a limited resource everywhere in any situation. So if something goes wrong, then we need somebody to, replace them. So that's where the multi-skilling is one of the important thing in near future also, now and near future also. I mean, these kind of situations. So what we are doing is we have completely started going in a video space, more from the classroom lectures or the learnings and the skilling. We have moved into the video space where all the trainings we started going into video, and people coming can quickly pick up things. So that is where, for example, I would say we have multiple plants in the country. So this sometimes one plant is doing really suffering, and then the other plants are feeling proud of we are not infected, and suddenly this migrates to in a month or 2 months. So this kind of really the scenario planning, what I said. So where we don't know how to bring new workforce, that is one thing, and quickly bring them on board is also one of the new challenge what we have found nowadays. So this is where the technology space what we started using so quickly, and of course we are in the process of using more on augmented space and VR space, but we are a little bit far to go, to be honest, on the skilling more on the plant side.
So you're
But video space is the one thing what we are greatly benefited for us, I would say, at this moment.
So you're essentially using VOD, video on demand sort of things to upskill. And I mean, how do you sort of replace an entire plant manpower? I mean, that seems like next to impossible.
So, Roudra, if I can come in, Roudra,
Yes, sir. Please.
I mean, this is a very important point that you touched upon, Roudra. In fact, World Economic Forum report says that by 2022, maybe too early a year or two here and there, they say that 133 million new jobs will be created,
Right.
and 75 million jobs will become obsolete. And therefore, the kind of skill which are needed for future is going to change largely. You mentioned about Industry 4.0. So, for example, you are not, your painting skill, for example, I'm using paint again, is critical. But tomorrow, what is more critical is that how are you able to program the robot for the given requirement, or how are you going to adjust your paint kitchen so that you are able to give the right quality required by the customer in a customized way. That skill will become far more important than your mechanical skill to be able to paint properly. So therefore, lots of reskilling is required, lots of new skills will be required, and lots of new jobs will be created. And therefore, it is our responsibility to really reskill and upskill our people.
Right. And so the key question is analytics, are you turning to analytics to help you in this regard? And for example, can analytics help you understand which are the right roles that needs to be upskilled, which are the right people that you can identify in your system that need to be sort of upskilled, who are ready? I mean, there was an interesting example that Mr. Khan talked about. I'm a defense geek, right? And he mentioned special forces. And that's a great case because a huge amount of money goes behind investing in any special forces personnel, right? I mean, training, equipment. So
Sure.
there's a potential there. Are you already using it? Do you see space for it?
Absolutely. In fact, analytics has taken is kind of given a center stage now. So we have at a company level a central analytics team, and we also have at a business function level an analytics team, and we have actually identified areas. By the way, every company has lots of data, but to be able to use that data, use that hindsight into proper analysis for creating a foresight is something that all of us can work upon. So we have chosen critical areas and identified, and again led by senior team who have domain expertise and people who have data expertise, and both of these are coming together in different areas, on operating costs, on quality management, on energy management, manpower planning and loss analysis, to name a few.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's a very important thing that you also mentioned. And this is true across industries, is what I'm noticing. Most companies, because getting data, creating data, storing data has become so much more easier today. There's treasure troves of data available, right?
Sure.
And the key question, therefore, is how do you use it intelligently? Can you sort of clean it up? Can you use it smartly?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Before I shoot my last question, and I know we are running slightly on the edge of time, a quick poll, and this time we will keep it short, the last poll. Just sharing it on the screen. This is on succession planning. So about 35 people, 40 almost. Yeah. So 43 seconds, I'm ending the poll now, and we have a very clear answer here. I mean, yes, right? Do you think forecasting, what if analysis, and optimization can play a major role in succession planning? Of course, yes. Manpower is an area I think I understand that AI/ML analytics is sort of come later into use. It's already been being used in demand planning and a lot of other functions, right? Supply chain, etc. But definitely, there's a very significant role here. My last question, and this is going to be open to, I'll start with Mr. Lall, but open to all our other panelists. We will not be able to, of course, put a timeline as to when this global outbreak will be over, and it's safe to say its impact will be far-reaching. What are your plans for the future for your workforce, keeping this sort of long-term impact in mind? So to say, don't want to use the word, but new normal, right?
Right, that's right. And let me tell you, some things will change forever. Some things have changed forever. Some new rules of the game have come into place, and I think we'll come out stronger than we were before. We'll be far more efficient. We'll be far more focused. We'll be far more health conscious, for example. Going out of this, and therefore the world that would emerge post pandemic will be a far more stronger world, in my view.
Right. Mr. Siddharthan, would you like to contribute to that?
See, what I would like to point out is that before COVID-19, we have seen SARC, Zika virus, Ebola, like that it is continuing. So I feel that even if COVID-19 finishes, maybe something else may come in. So because of COVID, now we are used to the term called the tuna, that is turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. This is what we have learned how to survive in the tuna situation. So this will definitely help us. help us in the future also.
Wonderful. So Mr. Amarnath, a Black Swan event such as this, what are your plans for the future of your workforce, keeping sort of a long-term impact?
I think our company is really seriously looking at the digitalization. I mean, that is one thing where being, experiencing the Europe continent, how Germany is benefiting today because of this AI, deep learning, all of this digitalization is really helping, and that's where we can learn a lot. I think what we have really forecasting ourselves. We formed a digital council, and at the apex level, and the projects are really, pushed by the leaders. Not when it is from the leaders, then it's deployed very fast because they share the vision, and the vision deployment is quite fast. And we see even our older plants, we are going in this more MES, ERP layering, all those kind of things, where we can do planning and be agile and be flexible. What Mr. Siddharthan said, Tuna, how we can be really agile. So that is where the digital element, every sphere, what we would like to bring. That is our vision.
Wonderful. Mr. Khan, what is anything to add to what our co-panelists have already?
Sure. I'll probably shift the gears now, right? We've spoken about technology. We've spoken about analytics. We've spoken about data. We've spoken about the new things that we are trying to do. Now, in the realm of all of this, what is the center point? The center point is the key resource, who is an employee of an organization. An employee like you, an employee like me, everyone. The only picture that I want to paint today is, because of this new normal, most of us are working from home. And if I need to touch upon the softer aspects to it, there is a thin line between the professional and the personal life, which is getting thinner and thinner as days progress, right? Now, I see almost like 57 attendees and 8 panelists, so roughly about 65 people here, right? And it's almost like, what, 7:30 in the evening. If it was a normal scenario, would we have been attending these calls? 6 o'clock, we would have said, thank you very much, see you tomorrow, right? So why I want to get that particular humor part today is, ultimately everything revolves around people, right? And if we are able to manage our people, manage our resources in the right context, using the right set of information that we are currently gathering tons of it, make use of it for the betterment of the employees, which will automatically trickle down into benefits for the organizations, right? So that's the closing remark that I generally wanted to talk about, and I'll rest my case here, guys.
Fantastic. So I will just take, so we are already, the time has really got extended. I'll just take one question from the audience. There's an interesting question from Gaurav Das. Hello, everyone. How does one effectively manage performance of the employees and gauge their expectations in terms of need for mentorship, guidance, etc.? So this is a soft question, which is why I found it very interesting. In this new sort of virtual workplace, how do you manage a performance and gauge their expectation in terms of mentorship, guidance, etc.? Mr. Siddharthan, maybe if you would like to.
See, this is the mentorship is an ongoing process. You see, currently what we are doing, yes, we have got in the organization the mentorship program going on as usual. The only difference is that earlier people were physically meeting, now they are having the digital meeting. So through this process also, I find that we have been talking to some of their mentors as well as mentees, and we find that it is going, they don't find much difference between the earlier non-digitized way and the digitized process. It's as effective as it is there.
Mr. Lall, anything to add? Sorry, sir. Mr. Lall, anything to add to that?
Yeah. So, for example, you're right. Because of this uncertainty, it is very difficult to, how to go about judging performance. So therefore, we follow typically a balanced scorecard kind of a, framework. So what we did is during the first 2 quarters, we had created a balanced scorecard around business continuity plans. How do we kind of, you know, restart? Then how do we kind of, ramp up businesses, going by. So we have actually divided the year into 4 quarters, and every quarter, as things are unfolding outside, the targets in the balance scorecard is changing, and therefore the target that leader is taking is changing, and therefore it really was from starting in a safe way to actually getting to a stable situation and then ramping up. So that's the way the targets have been kind of rolled out, and people identify with these targets, and that's how we look at the performance at the end of the year.
Wonderful. Thanks to all our panelists. I will quickly sum up our discussion. I'll take a few seconds, not more than that. I know we are already, already sort of extended our time. So, on the first, our question on manpower shortage, Mr. Lall spoke about Tata Motors, how an internal app similar to Arogya Setu but limited to Tata Motors has been created. New SOPs had been created to sort of manage manpower, make sure that people are safe. Operations was started slow on a single shift. Also, a lot of learning from global practices. This is, I think, true both for Tata Motors as well as Apollo Tyres, which has global operations. These have been sort of also used. Learnings from across plants, across regions have been used to sort of make sure people are safe. Very interesting anecdote by Mr. Siddharthan, how workers from Assam were brought back by coach when sort of manufacturing started after a month. 1 month, the Dalmia cement plant was shut. I think that's a massive sort of logistical challenge. Also, very interesting that high efficiency air filters were set up in the manufacturing facilities to keep employees safe. Because I mean, not only is it important for employees, but also for the entire company to be able to function in a smooth way. Very interesting is that a lot of product innovations took place as well. Ready concrete, right? Is what Mr. Siddharthan mentioned. That can be utilized by customers without employing a lot of workforce, thereby sort of reducing density. So that was key during this point. Mr. Amarnath mentioned a very interesting point about the fitness initiative started at Apollo. This was actually started 2 years back, but held in good stead in these difficult times. Also, Apollo has had a big focus on digitalization. This is something which is ongoing also. A big sort of way forward. The other thing is, which Mr. Amarnath mentioned, is giving confidence to manpower through the leadership, through what the company does is very important. This is an important soft aspect. I think connecting through social media where the senior leadership reaches out to employees. There's a two-way sort of communication, the feeling of togetherness. As one company, we are all dealing with this together. That is, I think, important. A very interesting thing I wanted to sort of mention today, that both, I think, Mr. Khan as well as Mr. Lall touched upon, is that people believe that manufacturing sector, and especially blue collar, you need to have work cannot be done remotely. But I think across all levels, this is one thing the entire sector has experienced, that you figured out new ways, new systems, and been pressed to do so. To be fair, right? But it is possible. A lot of roles can be done remotely. There are certain roles that are definitely people have to be there, and also I think going forward, one thing is going to be critical. Definitely, a lot of roles will be automated, processes will be automated, but it is important to keep a balance between saving some certain jobs. This is the reality of our Indian economy, right? I mean, but how do we identify what roles need to be automated? Clearly, a few important factors here. Definitely, fatigue, dangerous roles, or roles which require consistency are done better by machines. But there are certain roles that today and need to remain continue with people, at least for a certain period, unless we are able to upskill our population to a certain level where they become coders rather than managing the machines. I think that's what you mentioned, right? How do you code that machine rather than running the machine yourself? A paint shop. And lastly, Mr. Amarnath also mentioned, I think, a very important. I wanted to mention one point that Mr. Khan mentioned about creating virtual environments to test analytics, and that sort of helps you test these things in a very low cost environment, get a lot of buy-in. This was in addition to Mr. Siddharthan's point about the scenarios that the company has created in order to make sure that how do we use digitization, what difference will it make to the company, and what is sort of the end result going to be. Lastly, what Mr. Amarnath mentioned about multi-skilling is one of the most important things that has come up as a result of lesser manpower being available, of course. And that sort of brings me to the end of our discussion today. Thank you all for joining us. I want to especially thank our guest speakers for taking the time out to share their valuable insights. A big shout out to Sas for partnering with us for this series. We will be back again soon with the next episode. We spoke about manpower today. Stay tuned for the next episode on manufacturing, but a different function that we sort of explore and look at how analytics can make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists.